Hello, BookTube. I made a tough decision 2 days ago. Decision dog owners will be familiar with. I made a tough decision. I uh, I decided that it's long since time that I acclimated my little miniature schnauzer, Frida, to the reality that I will sometimes leave. And that I won't arrange a dog sitter, and that I won't arrange anything, and that I will be back, but that I will sometimes leave. It's not fair to either one of us for me to go on not acclimating her to that. It's not the end of the world. All she needs to do is sleep, or just lay on the back of the couch and look at the world. But no hysterics. And I put it off and put it off because she came to me when I was caretaking an old, weak, sick dog who's in the last months of her life. I wasn't leaving my beautiful Malin Moore. I wasn't leaving her anyway. It was very different. When a dog is at the end and they're terrified, they know that something's badly wrong. They know they're weak. They know they're soiling things. Then I wanted to be with her all the time. So I was with the puppy all the time. And after that, I think that mind frame carried over, and I just didn't want to leave Frida, even for her own good, even to teach her something that she needs to know. And in the last couple of days, I decided to take the bull by the horns and do that. So I've been leaving her for 2 or 3 hours in the afternoon, pretty much every day. I'm going to do it 3 days in a row this week. Not willy-nilly. I'm not just leaving and then standing out on the sidewalk reading on my Kindle until I come back inside. I've got actual errands to do. In fact, backed up errands that I haven't done, places I haven't gone, people I haven't seen, because I never leave the house anymore except to go, to places where I need to be. And I decided to change that. So I went out today. I must report. I don't mean to create any artificial suspense. She's handling it just fine. She understands a lot. She figures things out right away. I don't know, of course. The one thing I don't know is whether or not she's making any noise, crying or whining while I'm not here. But I don't think she is. I think if she were doing that, if she were vocally distressed while I was gone, I would know it when I got back. It would be the first thing she would tell me. And I'm not getting that impression. I don't get the impression that that's happening at all. So I've been leaving. And I left today. And I went out, I ran some errands, deposited some checks, saw some people, and of course I went to the Brattle Bookshop here in Boston, and that's the purpose of this video. I've got some books to show you. Because I've got thanks to your generosity, I've got a huge amount of credit there. It doesn't seem to be going down. So and since I don't go there every day, the Brattle Bookshop, for those of you who don't know, it's a beautiful, wonderful old used bookstore here in Boston. And in the lot next door, there's an open lot next door, there are sale carts on wheels crammed with books and sale walls on either side of the lot. $3, $5, and $1 books. And the kind of guiding ethos at the Brattle is that they don't tend to put junk out there. Sometimes, those of you familiar with the Strand bookstore in New York City, for instance, sometimes you get the very strong impression that what they put outside is what they don't want inside. That's not universally true at the Brattle. You could easily, I know because I've done it for years, you could easily confine your shopping at the Brattle only to the outside carts, and you would find great stuff every single week. So I went there. It was a fine day, and it wasn't hot, and it wasn't blowing rain, it wasn't freezing cold, and it wasn't snowing. So I went there with plenty of credit. It was a wonderful feeling. The only thing dragging at me was that I'm still not 100% sure about leaving this little dog. That's all. If I were, I would have been happy as a clam. But one way or another, I got there and I found some stuff, and I wanted to talk about it with you. So what have we got here? Okay. The first one is a book I love anyway. I mean, I don't have any copies at the moment because I usually give them away. And I've never actually seen it in hardcover with a dust jacket. I've only ever had this book in a big trade paperback of a cheap kind. 2 dots of glue on the spine so that you read it, you're loving it, but it's also cracking and falling apart. And the hardcover won't do that. And it's of pointed interest to me just lately. My involvement with the murder mystery genre has deepened in a couple of ways just recently. There's only one of you anywhere who listening to this is going to know what I'm talking about. But one way or another, Because of that, when I saw this book, it just jumped out at me. I realized right away I don't have a copy, and it's a classic. Every person that loves mystery should have this. It's Murder Inc. The revived, revised, and still unrepentant, perpetrated by Dilys Wynne. The subtitle, Fresh Trouble Brewing from 40 New Conspirators, plus the tea mystery so definitive you can smell it. This is, as the back cover copy says, it's suspiciously updated and revised. And this is just full of hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of little articles with tons of illustrations all throughout. Little articles on cardiovascular disease and the signs of it and how to simulate them, on kinds of murder, on little bits and pieces of author bios of all the mystery greats, of coincidences between titles, or how to hammer out an alibi, how to create suspense, how to do a plot. And the writers are some of the titans of the genre. So it's a great book to have, not only to thumb through for entertainment, but also to use for research. If you were, for instance, thinking about writing a murder mystery, you would really want this on yourself. So I was happy to find it, and it's in a hardcover with a dust jacket. So that's wonderful. Then the next one, also hardcover, also something I've only ever seen in trade paperback, even though I'm sure that I've come across the hardcover and just not paid attention to it. And it's a classic. It's a classic. It was a novel that everybody was reading. Everybody who went into subscription libraries or bookstores was asking for it. Every bookstore clerk had to know it. They had to know where to find it. They had to always keep it in stock. The author was a household name. The author was a favorite of the ruling powers of his day. And you've never heard of it, except for one of you. And it's out of print, and it will stay out of print. And no one reads it anymore for pleasure, and that's a terrible shame. It's Peter Simple by Frederick Marryat. This is Henry Holt's Heart of Oak Sea Classics. Look at how beautiful that is. What a lovely job they did with it. It's a whole series of naval classics, fiction and nonfiction. This is a novel about the title character who sort of bumbles good-naturedly. He is a pure spirit. He is a pure spirit. And he bumbles good-naturedly into the British Navy during the Napoleonic era, during the worst time in the world to be in the British Navy, or the best, depending on how you look at it, and has a ton of adventures that are patterned on the adventures that Marryat had himself. Marryat was an actual participant in the war at sea between England and Napoleonic France, and served under the great Cochrane, who you've heard mentioned on Riches and Reeds, as the Mark on Riches and Reeds mentioned that Cochrane was the example of the heroic age of sail captain, from whom everyone was then later devised. Hornblower, Jack Aubrey, Captain Kirk. You trace the genealogy back of those characters far enough, and you will get to Cochrane. And Marryat knew him and served with him and wrote a bunch of books. And they are delightful. I love them. I never pass up an opportunity to reread them. And when I saw this is a lovely series. I'm wondering if whoever sold this to the Brattle, this was in the sale lot today, but it was not in the sale lot the last time I was there. I'm wondering if whoever sold this to the Brattle maybe sold them all of the Heart of Oak classics, and that would be great. If that were true, that would be great. So Peter Simple was the next one, a novel, but still a classic, something I'm going to love to reread. And then another novel, a big one. This is A Man in Full by Tom Wolfe, with the printed hardcover, with the dust jacket with a little hole over the eye. This is about an Atlanta businessman, but it's mainly about the turmoil of race and commerce and speculation and infidelity in 1990s Atlanta. And it's by Tom Wolfe, who just recently died. And I realized that I didn't have any of his books. I don't even have Bonfire of the Vanities. God help us. And I know it's silly, but when a big literary name dies like that, I often feel a yen to read their books again. I should let some time pass, but I figure since nobody else was doing it, nobody else was letting any time pass, I swear, the body wasn't cold before quote-unquote think pieces were coming out, trashing everything that Tom Wolfe wrote after The Right Stuff. Absolutely ridiculous. And calling his novels thinly veiled screeds of racism that are juvenile and poorly done. Well, okay, all right, fine. But I read them as they were coming out. I was right there. I've been paying attention the whole time, and I'd stack my mind against yours, and I say they aren't. So you feel free to quote chapter and verse, and so will I. But you're simply stating that these things aren't good. Doesn't cut it with me. I can say how they are. And this is a terrific book. Dark, muscular. It's less elegant and a little less barbed in its satire than Bonfire of the Vanities, but it's brawlier. It's bigger in every way. I think it's Wolf's best book, so I was very glad to find it at the Brattle for $1. I was very glad to do that. I will put this on the shelf, and once the Wolf mania has died down a little, I will reread it, and we'll see. We'll see what I come to. And the next book, also a doorstop. Good Lord, I was practically buying these things by weight at the end, and there were other things that I left because by the time I was finished just picking these books, I already had like 100 pounds. But the next one is also huge. It's this thing. It's The Last Lion. This is the final volume of William Manchester's. William Manchester did great volume on the young Winston Churchill. And then he did a second volume on Churchill in the Wilderness Years, and so he was poised. Those books sold like crazy, and he was poised to write at least one more book, probably two, but at least one more book on Churchill during the war, during World War II, and his ill-fated, lopsided post-war career when he took ill. Manchester took ill, and it quickly became apparent. I mean, there was sort of George R.R. Martin speculation and hope, but it quickly became apparent he was not going to finish his series. Just a gigantic blow to the publishing industry and to millions of readers. And eventually, Paul Reed, who's a terrific guy and a terrific journalist, was sort of tapped to finish this volume. But finish is the wrong word. As I said in a review that I wrote back in 2013 when this first came out, I reviewed it. If I remember, I'll try to leave a link down below. But finish is the wrong word. There was hardly any of this book. Reed basically had to write it himself, and I found that fascinating. Because of course, if you're a writer who's tapped by the author's estate, and you knew the author, he knew Bill Manchester and liked him, and liked the books. Of course, if all that's true, you're going to feel that it's incumbent on you to sort of make this volume fit with the others, not just in terms of subject matter, but in terms of tone, in terms of the writer's voice. And you could do that. Reed is certainly talented enough to do that, but it's such a ghoulish exercise to do that, even for a few pages, much less 1,000 pages. And I knew that going in, and I thought, okay, well, what's he going to do? Is he going to do that so that readers of the box set or whatever at Christmas time could just remove his name and they'd feel like they were reading Bill Manchester? Or is he going to do something different, more risky, where it's the themes and preoccupations of Manchester, but his own voice? And he does the latter. I'm very happy to report. The book quickly becomes his own and is terrific, just terrific. And I had the galley copy, and I got rid of that. God, that's gone with the wind. And I had the finished copy, and that's what I pitched around, and that's what I did my review from. And then that went away, and then I got the paperback, and that went away. so I guess way in the back of my mind, I was thinking, if I find this thing again, get it. And I did. I found a beautiful hardcover. So, and the one of the nice things, I mean, it's a small thing. It's no reflection on the book, but it's a nice reflection on my profession every once in a while. One of the nice things is that somehow Paul Reed came across my review and liked it, and we had a very friendly email correspondence for a while. It dropped off, but it was fun while it lasted. I always love that. I always love that connection with authors. I love it when they last a long time, but I love it even when they're short term. It's great when you find an author who understands that the review is nothing personal. That you can, unless the review is personal, unless you're Christopher Hitchens, you're attacking someone's face. But if you keep your review just, here are the book's strengths, here are the book's weaknesses, here's whether or not you should buy it. I have had many, many, many authors contact me and say, okay, that was a tough review, but a fair one, thank you, and then want to correspond because right? That's the way it is. It's not you're not attacking them personally to review their book. I love it when that happens. So, and that happened in the wake of this. Was one of the biggest examples, one of the most high profile examples to happen to me after this prolonged return to book reviewing that I did, after the second act of book reviewing that I've done. And it was nice. It was nice to know that hadn't changed, because that happened a lot the last time I was reviewing books. And then the last book, I would have liked to find a hardcover with a dust jacket very much. I'll still look for one, but I don't. At the minute I saw it, I realized I don't have a copy, and I really want to reread it because it's terrific. Controversial. Argument starting, but terrific. And it has a crappy title because authors never consult with me. I will say once again to the publishing world at large, my services at titling anything you have on your docket are yours to command, and they are free. The title of this thing is Christianity, Social Tolerance, and Homosexuality. Now, if that's not a subtitle, I don't know what is, but this actually has a subtitle. Gay People in Western Europe from the Beginning of the Christian Era to the 14th Century, by John Boswell, who, when he wrote this book, was a super hottie. And this is incredible. It's incredible. It's scholarly, but it's extremely readable. It's sometimes also funny, actually witty and insightful. The way he dances around is only possible if you have an absolutely complete control of your material, and he does. So he just indulges in telling stories, which is fantastic. But what he wants to do with this book, and with the even more controversial book that followed it, is to sort of tilt a little at the complacency with which we look at gay history, right? We reflexively think, well, there's Plato's Symposium with Alcibiades, propositioning Socrates. And then there's a gap of a very, 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 very long time. And then there's, I guess, the trial of Oscar Wilde, and then there's another gap, and then there's the Stonewall riots. No. People have been gay all along. so they must have had a history. And what was it? And it's total egomania to say that it wasn't until Stonewall that anybody who was gay thought, hey, seems to me that I should have rights. That's just crazy. That's modernist thinking. Of course, they had an existence, social, official, political, religious, for the whole time that there's been humanity. And this book, I remember when I first read it. God, when was this? When did this first come out? It was when John Boswell looked like that, so it had to be a while ago. I think this was in the 70s. I'm not actually seeing. Here we go. 1981 or 1980. So quite some time ago. And I remember when I first read it, thinking, "Good Lord, why has no one done this before that I know of?" And it was just amazing to think about. Some of his conclusions, some of the ways that he uses the original sources that he uses, struck me as a little iffy. And there are a few inferences in here that I think are a bridge too far. They reach, but they're always fascinating. And I think that this is sounder than a lot of its harsh critics will say that it is. And it's just an overview of where in the documentary records, where in the historical record do we find what we would now consider gay people, and what were they doing, and how did they view themselves, and how did society view them, and what kind of rights did they have? Just wonderful. If you're interested in this sort of thing, this is the kind of history that fills in blanks. So I was so happy to find it. This is a big trade paperback, so this is gonna fall apart. I know it is. I mean, I'll read it again because I haven't read this in years, but it's gonna fall apart. And it has I immediately latched onto this. It has a little mauve envelope on the inside. I saw this once I had the book back here, and I thought, oh, so this was a gift from somebody to another back in 1980. And there's going to be probably a very revealing little note in here, but the envelope's empty because I'm sure the little note was revealing. But I highly recommend it. I highly recommend all of these things. So we have, what was the thing again? Christianity, Social Tolerance, and Homosexuality. That's the title of the book. Good Lord. And then The Last Lion, Paul Reed's conclusion to William Manchester's 3-volume Churchill biography. And then A Man in Full, gigantic masterpiece novel by the late unfortunately, the late lamented Tom Wolfe. And Peter Simple, a runaway bestseller of a bygone era. And Murder, Inc., an indispensable, fun reference novel, reference volume for anybody who's mysteriously inclined. And there you go. That was a Brattle book haul, and I admit, by the time I was done, that and a couple of other errands, I had a knot in my belly. I was worried about the little girl. I was worried she was miserable back here, that maybe she'd gotten into trouble or something like that. I admit, by the time I was, within baseball throwing range of the house, I was actually hurrying, which neither Nero Wolfe nor I like to do. And I need not have worried. This is a perfect little dog. She doesn't, even when she was a tiny little puppy, she has no inclination to chew on electrical wires, no inclination to tear at furniture, no inclination to pee or poop out of petulance. Oh, it was a clean apartment, a perfectly happy, friendly dog when I got back. There's no strain or stress or psychodrama at all. I probably don't need to worry about this at all, but I probably for the next few times will, until we're both accustomed to it. I'm gonna leave her for 3 hours tomorrow, and then we'll spend the weekend together, sort of to balance the scales. But one way or another, I'm gonna wrap this up for now, and I will see you soon. Thank you, BookTube.